Hi, I'm Margo. Welcome back to my sewing room. Today we're going to talk about month 6 of our Block of the Month project, and this month we will be making the bottom border of our quilt. The original has a 63-inch wide border. If you'll remember, back in January I had decided that I wanted to make a smaller version. My version no longer measures 63 inches. My version will only be 42 inches. And I get those measurements by measuring 8 and 16 and 8, plus 5 and plus 5, so that gives me my 42 inches. Half of the 42 inches is 21 inches, so that is the finished length of my shortened border. The first thing we have to do is to print out the pattern from the website. This will print out on 4 pages, and all we have to do is attach them with a piece of tape along the dotted lines. The finished border measures 8 inches wide, and I realized that if you measure the center motif from the top edge of the paper to the bottom 8 inches, we trim a ½ inch off the printed pages. So there's our 8-inch finished measurements. I needed to make a pattern to transfer this to my fabric and also to reduce my smaller size. Because I didn't have the vinyl that I used in previous appliques on this project, I didn't have a piece big enough, so I'm using Golden Threads paper, which is very easy to see through. I cut border strips of this paper 8½ inches, which is the unfinished width of the border. I simply put this over the pattern and traced off the entire pattern, and that gave me the original size. And that would work fine. That's going to work fine on my red version, but I'm making a smaller version with the kit fabric, so I need to reduce this. The way I chose to reduce it was to I worked from the center and I folded in the center, and I just traced off about the first 8 inches, just like it is in the pattern. And then I had marked my 24-inch line. This is the finished size, the dimension of the smaller version, and I took that finished line and traced off the end part of the pattern the way it is. So that gave me a beginning and an ending, and what I needed to do was to reduce the middle of it. So all I did was folded that down to measure my 24 inches. So I'm using the original end and the original beginning, and I have to resolve this center part. And I looked at this and I thought, well, maybe that big flower could go here and I could swing a tulip out this way. So basically that's what I did. This is going to be my shortened shape. You are welcome to try anything you think will work, but I used the beginning and the end just like the original pattern, and I just made the middle flow. So that is my pattern that I will use for my smaller version of the kit fabric. And what I did with my fabric, we're told to cut it into 10-inch strips. Instead of marking the finished size on the fabric, which is what the directions tell us, I marked the unfinished size. So this is the cut size. All I have to do is line up my paper pattern, which is cut to 8½ with the lines drawn on the fabric. Oh, I marked these white lines with a Bowen chalk pencil Sew Line makes one, Fons and Porter makes one. I like this because it'll stay on while I'm working with the fabric. I can take my different applique pieces and just flip them up, just like I did with the vinyl sheet in an earlier month's applique. I can use this for placement. You may want to review that applique video. I'd like to talk a minute about one of the elements that we're going to be doing this month, and that is the vines. Our instructions tell us to make 1-inch cut vines and fold them into thirds and then baste along the middle. That makes a really nice, easy to manage vine that curves easily, and it'll be easy to manage. My problem with this is that it's 3 layers thick, and especially if you're doing a fusible applique, I think that gives a little bit of a ridge when you put your appliques over this vine. But if you're going to do this, I suggest that you take your 1-inch strips and use a rotary ruler and score the fold lines with something like a Hera marker or a marking tool that we used to use these in dressmaking that have the little notched wheel, but they make this with a solid wheel, and the solid wheel is what you want to use, or a Hera marker. If those lines are scored, it's an easy thing to just fold it into thirds and then to baste those together like the instructions tell us. However, I decided that I think that width, which is 3/8 of an inch, looks a little chunky to me when I put it with the actual size of the leaves that we're going to be using. So I've made the decision that I want to make mine a little bit smaller, make my vines a little bit smaller. I want to make my vines 1/4 inch instead of 3/8 of an inch. And what I'm going to do that with is a Clover bias tape maker. I have the 2 smallest sizes I have are 1/4 and 1/2. Now the half is going to be too big, so I'm not going to use that, so the 1/4 inch is what I'm going to use. These strips can be cut to a smaller size. They only have to be cut 1/2 inch instead of a whole inch. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Take the fabric. Now this was starched earlier before we cut it in one of the earlier months. I cut a little angle on one end. This just has to be fed into the top of the little gizmo. I use a pin to slide it down so that the end of it protrudes out the end. Turn it upside down, and I like to pin it into my ironing surface. Then I can just take a hot dry iron, because it's already been starched, and by slowly moving the device, the fabric just feeds into the back end of it, and I can easily iron as much of the bias strips as I need. The advantage of this is it's a smaller size, but it's only 2 layers thick. The 2 outsides raw edges are folded to the center, and I have a perfect 1/4 inch wide seam for my stems. And I like that dimension better with the leaves that we're going to be using. There are lots of other ways to create stems. There are bias bars, and you can pin into an ironing surface and slide the fabric under the pins. I've never had much luck with that, but some people really like it. So find a technique that works for you. Make the stems the size that you want to work with. And I look forward to seeing your projects on the BOM Show and Tell. Until then, it's a new day every day.